if you don't have a brand, even with one property, if you don't have a website, you're just asking for trouble. Arbitrage works in funny ways. And where the OTA models are going, you're going to be at the bottom of the food chain if you can't distinguish who you are, even at one property. I can't stress that enough, because that's what's going to allow you the vehicle to decide to scale out. I'll give you something anecdotal, and sorry to even tell this story, but it's the reality of what happens when you're not thinking about the brand components when you come out the door. So
this is episode number 95 of the Short-Term Rental Success Stories podcast.
Are you an investor that's looking to have your home professionally managed? Go to cohostit.com for more information.
Welcome back to Short-Term Rental Success Stories. I'm your host, Julian Sage. This is a show where I talk to hosts about their journeys in starting and growing their short-term rental business. My goal is that you'll be able to walk away with practical information that'll help you become a better host and learn how to scale your business. Like any exceptional host, we all strive for 5-star reviews, so please go on over to iTunes and let us know what you enjoy, as it really helps support the show. If you haven't done so already, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation, to connect with the community. Hey, what is going on, Host Nation? I'm super excited to be back again with you this week. If you guys are only subscribed to the Short-Term Rental Success Stories podcast, and maybe you've been missing my voice because maybe you noticed the past couple of weeks, haven't been uploading as much just because we have a lot going on in our own management company, in our coaching business, as well as our investment company. So a lot of different balls that we are juggling here. But I love being able to talk to hosts, and definitely I'm still going to be putting out these episodes. Maybe it just won't be as frequent as when we first started this podcast, up to 95 episodes. That's a lot of interviews and it takes a lot of time, but I do love having these conversations because it opens up my mind, and I hope that it opens up and inspires you as well. But if you are missing some of the content that I have been putting out, and you want to also subscribe or listen to our other show, Vacation Rental Machine podcast with John Bell and I, you could definitely subscribe there. If you haven't done so already, you can actually look at John and myself in the face. We have a YouTube channel. Go to Short Term Sage, or you could also go to shorttermsage.com/YouTube and subscribe to the show. We put out a lot of content on there as well. That one, we are very regular with putting out one episode a week because it's a little bit more manageable for us. They're bite-sized nuggets for you to be able to implement in your own short-term rental business. Some of the things that we're utilizing in our business, some of John's experience, answering your guys' questions that you guys post in the Host Nation Facebook group. So if you haven't joined the Host Nation Facebook group as well, of course, go to shorttermsage.com/Host Nation. You can join that group and ask your questions so we can answer them on the Vacation Rental Machine podcast. But today I had the special honor of speaking with Vince Perez. Vince is a partner at Beach House Rentals, a vacation rental management company in the Santa Cruz, California area with 100 properties under management. The unique thing is they are 100% not dependent, so the opposite of dependent, independent of these OTAs or online travel agencies. So they are not using Airbnb, Vrbo, anything like that. They are 100% getting direct bookings and referrals. Really interesting to be 100% and having 100 properties. Vince is also the founder of Fetch My Guest, which is a marketing platform that gives independent vacation rental professionals complete control of their brand. So you're going to notice a common thread in this episode talking a lot about brand independency from the OTAs and how you can actually go ahead and set that up. So in this episode, Vince shares his story of moving from a corporate executive at the Hyatt hotel and then coming to the dark side with vacation short-term rental space to becoming a partner and marketing strategist for Beach House Rentals. We also talk about why it's so important for building brand equity, the pros and cons of Airbnb and OTAs on the industry, what it takes to build a 100% referral and direct booking business, as well as a whole lot more. So if you like my show notes for this episode, any of the links that we talk about in this episode, go to shorttermsage.com/STR95. Or if you like my show notes sent directly to your inbox every week, then go to shorttermsage.com/show notes. With all that being said, on to this week's conversation. Hey, welcome back, Host Nation, to another episode of Short-Term Rental Success Stories. In this episode, I have the special honor of speaking with Vince Perez. Vince, would you please introduce yourself to the Host Nation, let them know who you are and what inspired you to get into short-term rentals?
All right. Well, my name is Vince Perez. I'm a partner at Beach House Rentals in Northern California, we're actually 60 miles south of San Francisco. I'm also the CEO of Fetch My Guest, which powers the Stays Group. The Stays Group is actually one of the largest marketplaces for independent operators in the U.S. that drives book direct. What drove me into the industry, like a lot of folks, you kind of fall into it. I was looking at opportunities after I sold my previous company. And lo and behold, I came across Beach House Rentals, had investment opportunity with Beach House. They were doing great. They were just looking to find ways to scale up their business. And my background before I went into technology was actually in the hotel business. So I thought it was an artful blend of being able to combine my hotel background and also my technology background to see how we can scale up, which already was an amazing brand, which now continues to be a global brand.
So I love kind of going back to the beginning. Can you talk about that experience? I mean, coming from the hotel industry over into the, short-term rental, vacation rental industry, what were you doing in the hotel industry, and why would you even want to switch into the vacation rentals, which, now, all the hotels, we hear all this drama about, it's the vacation rentals, the short-term rentals, they're taking business away from us. You need to kind of talk about what you were doing and how that influenced you moving into the vacation rental space.
Sure. So I cut my teeth in the hotel industry. I've got an affinity. A lot of my friends still in the industry. And I've always loved hospitality. And in fact, hospitality served me well when I went into technology. Because in technology, there wasn't a lot of, they weren't big on relationship building, right? You're building a piece of technology, you're selling it, and you're moving on. And when I looked at the technology, I looked at the hospitality components because at the end of the day, it impacts people. And so if you were to strip out all the technology from any industry, quite frankly, but vacation rentals in particular, you're left with your guests, your owners, and your team, right? And all those are very tangible assets that don't require technology. So when I fell into vacation rentals, what the appeal was, when I first looked at the business, it was like, wow, I don't know if I want to do this. This looks like there's a lot of moving parts, and there is. It's a lot of hustle, right? These are pure entrepreneurs at their finest. But I also saw a pretty big opportunity. And what got my attention was I had been removed from the hotel industry about 10 years at that point when I went into my technology ventures. But when I looked at the hotel industry or the vacation rental industry, it mirrored a lot of what the hotel industry had already experienced. And what I mean by that is that there were dominant entrants at the time. When I came on board with vacation rentals, HomeAway was just getting their footing. And I remember being at a conference in Washington, D.C., and my now partner here at Beach House Rentals was at a different conference for vacation rentals about 4 miles away. And she said, hey, you may want to check out this conference. I'm like, great. Went over there for my other conference, checked it out. And HomeAway was just rolling out their offering. And I remember how elated a lot of these property managers were, and certainly my partner as well. And she's like, wow, what do you think? I'm like, so I think you're in trouble. I saw this movie. It doesn't end well if you don't have your brand recognition. And so when I looked at that and I got involved in the business, the focus was how do we make Beach House Rentals into that brand? So when you look at our industry, every single independent operator has a unique brand. And the biggest difference is with hotels, you've got about 3 or 4 different categories. With vacation rentals, every single property is a different category. Every single one is unique, whether you have one property or 1,000. And so there's a lot of opportunity around that in wrapping brand equity, which is what you really want if you want to exit a business. So coming into the business, I thought it was an artful blend of those components where I can use my marketing acumen, my technical acumen, my hospitality. And I learned a lot. And I still every day learn from this industry. We've got a lot of amazing people, and there's a lot of knowledge of wealth. I'm blessed in that within the Stage Group, I get to talk every Thursday. I get together with members of different parts of the marketplace, all operators, and we learn from each other. And there's not a single time where I'm not on a conversation where I don't learn something new. And that's the great part about our industry is that we're learning, I think now, how to really lift each other up and work together. And I think it bodes well for the future of the industry.
You brought up a really interesting point. You said that you left the hotel industry where, it was and went into the vacation rental industry when it was repeating maybe some of the similar steps that the hotels did. What were some of the things that the hotels were doing well? Because you were an executive at the Hyatt, so you definitely climbed the ranks there. What were some of the things that the hotels were doing really well, or that maybe they foresaw that the vacation rental industry just hasn't maybe well prepared yet?
It's real simple. It's all about your brand, and this is what hotels got right. the Hyatt, the Marriott, all those brands, they do well. By the way, I'm a huge proponent in hotels and vacation rentals working together. I know that may sound opposite of what a lot of people think, but the product sets are although they're not similar, the hospitality component and how it's executed is very much in line with how hotels operate. And I'm talking about the quality components of our industry and the quality supply, if you will, of what we have. So I think that's important to recognize off the bat. So what the hotels did that were so strong that they always focus on the brand. Even today, if you see any commercial on TV with a hotel, what do they talk about? Book direct, right? So they've done a great job of keeping the OTAs at bay and keeping balance in their inventory. I had incredible experiences with that with Hyatt and working in operations and sales and marketing, all the different things. But the biggest reward for me is when I worked for this corporation out of Japan called the Nikko Corporation. And the reason why that was so unique is that we literally built a hotel from scratch, from a parking lot in San Francisco, surrounded by all the top brands in the world. We were a luxury hotel. We were going to, make a big splash in the city. And that's very difficult. That's very similar to what we see in vacation rentals when all of a sudden someone with one property or two property wants to start up in a saturated market in vacation rentals. The only way you can figure this out is by doing two things. With the Nikko, which was very smart when we launched the hotel, is what did we do right away? Well, we wanted to make sure how our brand and differentiate how we were different from all the other hotels in the area. That's the first thing we did, is that what are the unique things that we know if we can get someone in our hotel one time, they'll come back. The second thing we did is we made friends with everybody in our neighborhood. I literally had a 1,000-room property across the street from me, the Hilton. And from the corner, right around the corner from that, I had another 1,000-room properties at the time was the Park 55. That's 2,000 rooms that are swamping my 438. So I also knew, because it was a big convention town, that there would get overflow. So I would go over there and make friends with the GMs and stuff and say, hey, look, if you have overflow, we're right across the street. We're a luxury brand. We'll take care of your customers, because I knew the last thing they wanted to do was walk that customer. That's the worst thing you want. You're coming in, tired traveler, all of a sudden you're sold out. You have nowhere to put them. So that's how we were able to compete in a saturated market, being an unrecognizable brand, certainly not recognizable in the U.S. And now we're able to funnel in all this business from corporate travelers. And it worked, because once they stayed in our hotel, and because it was unique, we were the only at the time rooftop swimming pool, indoor swimming pool, great fitness center, everything was top notch. That's how we filled our hotels. And so I look at that experience, and that's exactly where we are today in the vacation rentals. There's so many different brands out there, and they're so unique. But it's a very, as you probably know in our industry, right? We've never had a demand issue. In fact, that demand issue has really, really expanded, because the pandemic exposed a lot of folks that normally stayed in hotels to the vacation rental product, right? That's a huge opportunity. Where there is an issue in our industry is the supply side, right? There's just not enough supply. And then when we look at in the Stage Group perspective, is we're focused on quality supply, right? And so those are folks that are making investments in their brand. They recognize the value of the brand component. They recognize what happens when you execute on customer excellence. All those things bring together repeat business, and that's the holy grail of whether it's a hotel or vacation rentals. At the end of the day, you want repeat guests. So for Beach House Rentals, as we scaled out our business, we knew that the cheapest, the most cost-effective way to operate was on the excellence side, on driving our operational value, because that would be our tipping point to drive in more repeat guests. So fast forward where we are today with Beach House Rentals, and 87% of our business is repeat. When you're driving that much repeat business, a couple of things happen. You drive down your operating cost. You now have marketing dollars to do some extremely unique things that's going to drive more direct bookings. Got some happy owners. That's the best part about it, right? Owners love when there's heads on beds. And now you kind of come complete circle on the customer excellence side that actually drives equity into your brand. And that's not rocket science. And that's one of the things within our stage group membership that we're able to achieve. These are operators that have survived economic downturns, a pandemic, what have you, and they're still standing. The only way you're able to do that is by really driving great operational value.
I want to hit on a few points. First one was that I thought was pretty interesting. You said in the beginning that the difference between a hotel and a vacation rental is that with the vacation rentals, you've got a bunch of individual brands almost. Every property kind of almost has like its own style. So as a property manager, when you are, let's say, taking on properties, how are you able to keep your brand in line if every property that, every individual client, every individual homeowner that, is a potential, for you to be able to help them, how can you make sure that when someone's staying in one of your properties that they're able to have a really good experience in another property?
Sure. So that's all about quality, right? Now you talk about quality control. And again, it depends what level you're at, right? You're starting off with one property. You may not be as focused on the scalability of where you want to go, but you hopefully are focused on your brand equity and your quality control, what you're doing. And I'm a firm believer what starts right stays right. So in answer to your question, let's make the assumption, we get to be picky here at Beach House Rentals because we have a great product. So what we're really looking for, quite frankly, is the owner, right? What are the attributes of that owner? Are they someone that really understands what we're trying to achieve here at Beach House Rentals? How much do they understand the industry? What's really their goals and motivation? How flexible are they? How important it is to them how we treat these guests and how we drive our bookings, right? It's really about the relationship component because especially if you're in a leisure destination, the assumption is that the home's nice, right? We're in a very nice area. The homes are nice. It's a great community. So we're already making that assumption. So everything, I think, as you scale out the business, and I think going forward, quite frankly, nowadays, it's having that great relationship with the owner. Because one of the things that we at Beach House Rentals realized through the pandemic is how incredible the investments, especially that my partner has made before I came on board with the owners. The owners were actually absolutely incredible during the pandemic. We went through a couple different hardships, not just the shutdown. So we went through the shutdown, and then we started getting some relief, and then we had some pretty big fires in the area, right? So now we used our inventory to house these first responders, and that's in conjunction with our owners. So a lot of it really is in the equity that you're building, not just your brand, but with your owners. So to me, the first piece of having that success with choosing the right property always starts with the owner.
And with that, I mean, a lot of people that are just starting off, though, maybe they're not in a position where it's like they feel like they can really be selective with how they take on. Is there, how can you really grow your company? Or, if you're trying to make, vacation rental management like a full-time thing, like how can you do that if there's so many people out there and, everybody's trying to offer management services? How can you really distinguish yourself without being like overly selective?
That's a great question, Julian. There's definitely going to be separation in this category going forward without question. So again, whether you're one property, and this is if you want to stay in the business, and especially if you own your properties and your investment properties, if you don't have a brand, even with one property, if you don't have a website, you're just asking for trouble. Arbitrage works in funny ways. And where the OTA models are going, you're going to be at the bottom of the food chain if you can't distinguish who you are, even at one property. I can't stress that enough because that's what's going to allow you the vehicle to decide to scale out. I'll give you something anecdotal, and sorry to even tell this story, but it's the reality of what happens when you're not thinking about the brand components when you come out the door. So I was speaking at a conference last year, obviously pre-pandemic, and I was after my talk, I was sitting having lunch. I had a gentleman to my left who had been in the industry for about 25 years. Had 70 properties and had made the decision to scale back to 40 because he was worried about what was happening with his quality control and also the dependency he was having at Airbnb. To my right, I had a couple that had been in the industry for 2 years, very bright couple. They were already at 35 properties. They were loving the industry, having a great time. And when we started talking about distribution components of that, all the properties were on Airbnb. And that's all they kept talking about was Airbnb. So I said, that's wonderful. So what's your retention strategy, right? You've got owners. They're obviously not all your properties. And so what's your strategy to keep those owners happy? Is it strictly on Airbnb? What's your repeat business going to look like? What's your branding component so you can break away from that? And like, well, we're not worried about that. We just want to scale the inventory. We think someone's going to acquire us, right? So I got a call from those folks in April asking, is there anyone you know that wants to buy what we're doing? And it's sad because I couldn't help them because I told them, it's like, think about the position you're in right now. You've got owners that are not happy with you. You're trying to exit a business. What do you have as a value? You don't have any assets. You don't have a brand, and you don't have owners that are going to be happy with you already. So to me, you just need to make it right with the owners and be upfront about what's going on, because your likelihood of recovery is going to be very challenging. At that time, we had no idea when the OTAs were going to wake up. They weren't advertising. People were still in lockdown, right? And now I look at the gentleman that was to my left. He made some pretty prudent decisions that saved him through the pandemic. He scaled down. He focused on quality, which saved him a ton of money. And he's doing pretty well. He survived. He's going to make it. So when you look at that dynamic, you can, if you think you can come into this business and build it on Airbnb, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. You just are.
Now, kind of playing devil's advocate here, with the hotel industry, was it not the proliferation of the internet and, these different, like booking.com and these different channels that also allowed a lot of maybe hotels that hadn't been able to be seen to be able to also grow, and start generating that revenue, be able to start to collect that guest information and grow their business? Or was that not something that you saw when you were working with the hotel companies?
Well, so here's a dirty little secret about the hotels, right? Depends what market you're in, right? So if you're in a leisure and destination, you've got a massive branding component around you. But I'll give you an example of just a hotel in San Francisco. So the hotel in San Francisco that I was involved with, and I'll give you two ends of it. You had Hyatt. I worked for the Hyatt Regency in San Francisco. We had 1,000 rooms, but we had this massive marketing engine called Hyatt Regency. We also had this huge network of other properties that were funneling property to us. Now we have the Nikko, the Japanese hotel in San Francisco with 500 rooms. The similarities between that was not all the inventory was needed by the OTAs. And here's a dirty little secret. 500 rooms at the Nikko hotel, but 400 of those rooms were already sold to groups that were coming in and taking up our meeting space and having conventions and all that. So that meant we really had about 100 properties to sell, right? 100 rooms, I should say, to sell. Of that, 50 of it went to our, gold chain programs, what have you. So that leaves another 50 properties. Another 25 of those properties actually went towards folks who were coming in that were extending their business travel to vacation travel in San Francisco. And then there's about 25 properties that we gave to the OTAs to sell on low yield days. So the point to this whole thing is now the OTAs have about 20%, 10% really of the inventory to sell on days that we give it to them. And so what an OTA will tell you is that, we sold 100% of that hotel's inventory. You're only selling a finite piece of my inventory. And that's when I give it to you, right? So that's where the opportunities are actually created. So when I look at the vacation rental side, anytime I do any events or I'm speaking, because I'm always talking about book directing brands, et cetera, the first thing I say to operators is when you're first starting out, especially, use every point of distribution you can until you don't need it. And you better have a plan for your brand strategy going forward if you want to survive. So I always urge folks, use whatever distribution, whatever OTA works for you, but have a plan to drive that direct business at some point, because that's what's going to get you through the lean times. So that's what I've learned from the hotel side. At the hotel side, what we did was so good is we put our brand first. Even whether it's a small hotel operating in a massive saturated market, that's no different than a small vacation rental operator working in a saturated market. You just got to make those decisions. So relative to your inventory, when you're first starting out, that first property coming on board may not be your ideal, but it's a start. So that's my point, is just start, get something in there and start honing your skills to be able to execute on that. Because the reality is, if you're good, you're just going to get better. People are going to like you. And again, I know some very small operators that execute and do a wonderful job, but I also know some fairly large operators that do a very good job as well. And there's plenty of inventory out there to go around, because at the end of the day, you're selling that experience component, right? That customer excellence. And that's what they're going to remember. And if you're a smaller operator, you only have so many days you can be able to sell into, right? So if you can get that one thing right and they have a great experience, and all of a sudden they're on social media, they're not on Airbnb, they're on social media talking to folks about this great experience they had at your property, that's a huge win. Huge.
When I think of OTAs, it always kind of makes me think of like Amazon. Amazon, it's it's this online platform for individual business owners to be able to list their items on there. And a lot of people have had success. A lot of people have been able to start their businesses. They've been able to grow successfully. I've heard plenty of horror stories of people getting shut down, or their Amazon not liking something, or they change their policy, or they take up all the income. But still, for what it's done for a lot of people, it's definitely helped. Do you not think that just listing on the OTAs, especially for maybe people that they're just looking to make some extra income from their vacation rental or their short-term rental, maybe they're not interested in starting a brand or building a larger scale business, but they want to be able to maximize their rental profit and have something that is not adding additional layers of stress? Do you not see OTAs being a benefit in this area?
Without question. I think the OTAs are a massive benefit in the scenario that you just described, right? So if you're just looking to make money from your properties, OTAs are the way to go. But if you're looking for something to actually grow a business and have a brand and have something lasting, you're going to need to look a different direction, because, at the end of the day, right, they're monetizing your efforts, right? Just like Amazon, by the way. So it's all about control at that point, because I think as the market becomes tighter, it will become arbitrage, because maybe for someone that just wants to kind of, make ends meet, if you will, maybe they charge a different commission structure for those that aren't branded, if you will, because they see that as opportunity. The OTAs will see that as opportunities. There's all these little fluctuation points that are going to happen. But absolutely, if you just have a couple of properties and you just want to get heads on beds, as they say, OTAs are your single greatest asset to get you there. Again, if you're looking to build something, that's a little bit different. If you're looking to build equity in your portfolio, you got to think differently.
And, you being an investor and, talking about how someone was trying to sell off their portfolio. We actually had another guest on the show, Julie George, and she built up her portfolio to, I think, around it was around 130 units. And I believe that she was only utilizing OTAs, and she was able to cash out for around, multiple six figures with that. Do you think that this is something, and she was picked up, this company was picked up by another larger property management company. Is this not something that you think that there is equity in just the amount of properties, or do you think that having a smaller portfolio that is maybe more focused on the brand equity and the direct bookings, as opposed to the portfolio size and the revenue that's generated from that, is a better potential investment?
So when did this exit happen?
Pre-COVID.
There's your answer. So you're looking at two different things, right? You're looking at someone's trying to drive portfolio asset value to exit, which again is fantastic if that's your focus. And then you've got the other component where you're actually looking to build a scalable, revenue generating, high profit business on the property management side, right? The brand components. Those are two different things. To do that today, I think even at the depressed prices that we're going to see in urban areas are great examples of it, right? In San Francisco, I was just down there this weekend, you've got a lot of vacancies, and you've got rentals now that are 30, 40% less than they would have been last year, right? So great. Logic says that's a great buying opportunity, but what's that asset value going to look like going out the other way? We don't even know what Airbnb is going to do. We don't know what the urban centers are going to look like. I can tell you from being in San Francisco, there's a lot of shut down restaurants. So you got to build up that component to make all that work. So that's a long way of kind of saying you could scale the business that way if you want, but what's the asset value of that person's going to acquire that? It's going to be based on all those other things working in unison. Make sense? So if you're going to go that route, you should at least expect to hold on to that portfolio a little bit longer than you would have anticipated.
Hey, this is Julian, and I wanted to be able to give you our newest book, Airbnb Secrets Revealed, How to Build a Fortune on Airbnb Without Owning Property. In this book, we talk about the concepts of rental arbitrage investing, as well as co-hosting, and how you can build a business leveraging other people's properties. This book is perfect for the new short-term rental investor, and it's something that I wish that I had when I first started, as it would have saved me a lot of trouble and helped me to understand how to be able to leverage the power of short-term rental investing in your own real estate portfolio. If you'd like to get our newest book completely for free, go to shorttermsage.com/free book. Now, back to the show. And do you think that moving forward in the future, that because when you talk to anybody, I mean, a lot of people that aren't like in the vacation rental space, everything's an Airbnb. With that, do you see that just more people that come into the space, more short-term rentals, more vacation rentals, that everything is going to be just Airbnbs? Or do you think that there is enough here, or that people are really going to be able to differentiate themselves than what the industry is heading towards, which is just, Airbnbs per se? Yeah.
So I think the answer to the first part, beach house rentals as an example, we don't use Airbnb, and nor do we plan to. To expand further in the stays group, I could tell you that within our network, the uptake of Airbnb is probably less than 5% right now. I know operators that were 100% of 30 more properties on Airbnb last year that are not going to renew, right? They're putting all their focus in their brand. So the second part of that is what I think there's going to be a lot of different models evolving from this. It's not just going to be an Airbnb. There are there are actually probably 4 different cohorts, right? When we look at Airbnb. So I'm a firm believer, when I talk to folks, I always say I'm looking for people with assets, not allowances, right? I'm not looking to get into the race for the bottom. So when I look at the Airbnb at scale, to your analogy of Amazon, that's where that's going to, unless you distinguish yourself, that's where that part of the market will go. But I think there's a lot of opportunities around adding, there'll be different models that will come into play that allows that smaller operator to distinguish themselves. I'll give you a simple example. To become that super host, you're literally creating content that drives Airbnb's brand, not yours. So you're paying them twice. You're paying them commission, but you're also paying their marketing engine. They're using your efforts to put you in a sea of thousands to hopefully monetize your property, right? So I think there's going to be models that will get tweaked that will allow for both, right? So you can continue working with the OTA components, but maybe when you're building out that content and the unique things about your brand, there's a different vehicle that will be out there to help accommodate that. So I don't certainly envision. It's just like Starbucks, that's a great analogy, right? So I remember when Airbnb came on board, and even pre-pandemic, well, Airbnb is like Starbucks, right? Starbucks is going to destroy the coffee industry. Are you kidding me? I mean, I go in my village, we don't even have a Starbucks, but there's 7 coffee shops, independently operated, so there's room for everyone. So I don't see that. I mean, you got Marriott coming into the game, again, different cohorts. So Airbnb will have a different cohort than a Marriott. Vrbo's got a different cohort than Airbnb. So I think you're going to see in 2021, these operators trying to distinguish what that cohort is. So if I'm a small operator, again, depending on what you want to do, if you want to go to scale and you're looking at the real estate portfolio, Airbnb is a great bet. If you're looking to build out brand, maybe it's 25% Airbnb, 50% Vrbo, and then focus on your brand components.
how much of value, because, we talked about, that brand, the value in the brand, the value that you're investing into your company. Is it so much of a financial, like an immediate financial benefit to, investing into, marketing, or investing into, trying to pull yourself away from the OTAs? Because if you're pulling yourself away from the OTAs, that costs time, that costs energy, that also is pulling away from maybe a lot of eyeballs that could potentially have seen your property. How much of a value, aside from, let's say, brand equity, is there in pulling away from the OTAs?
Sure. So again, it depends what stage you're at. So we're in a very unique position because we are totally and completely independent of the OTAs. But I think the first thing to think about is the brand equity component, right? So it's like a stock. At the end of the day, if and when Beach House Rentals exits, it's going to exit on the strength of the brand. No different than a stock. So that's the trade-off when you talk about, is that investment worth it? So to me, it was a no-brainer. When we made the decision to, as painful as it was, because we knew we'd get less bookings, to pull back from the OTAs by 50% and take those dollars and put them into marketing, it worked out pretty well for us. So because we have such a strong repeat business now and a strong engine, it's a no-brainer for us in that those dollars go into driving our brand. Now we get to do really cool things. We're putting, touchscreen displays in all of our units now, promoting our networks. We're doing all these great things that really come due to the fact that we're not dependent. Now, someone that is 50%, 70% dependent on the OTAs, now you have to figure out what's important to you, right? Is it going to be profitability? And that's what we learned in the pandemic, right? A lot of folks that were heavily dependent on the OTAs had a tougher time recovering. And I think we're going to see that play out in the next 9 months, quite frankly. I think we'll start really seeing, mergers and acquisitions, not just in technology, but also on the property manager side. And that's really kind of where your difference is, that you're wholly dependent on that OTA and you don't really have that, that parachute, if you will, that allows you to kind of get through the lean times to shift to a staycation type of model because people recognize your brand. So I think there's always a balance to what you're doing. You're pulling different levers, right? As you're in, depending where you're at in your scalability. But I think you always want to be able to pull those levers to the point where, okay, I need more bookings. How do I do that? The OTA is a quick fix, but always have this other bucket. What's the execution plan, especially when you're in leisure destinations, especially when you're in drive to. The one thing I know with Beach House Rentals is that if I get someone into our units, they're going to come back. And I get to offer them another place to go because of the stays group. Now I'm adding tremendous value to that stay. Will they walk away thinking about Vrbo or Airbnb or stays group Beach House Rentals, right? That's the thing that I'm banking on. So as you're scaling up, those are the levers that you need to decide. Do I need more bookings? What's the quickest way to do it? The OTAs, absolutely. But what's the plan, the retention plan, so I'm at profitability and I can better manage my operational components so I can weather downturns in the markets, because they happen. We're just coming out of one, but these things happen.
I think, a lot of people, like including myself, were conceived from Airbnb. We were very dependent on the teat that Airbnb provides. But at a certain point, though, you're saying that we should definitely, be branching out and stop being so dependent on the platform at a certain, once you've reached a certain level, being able to remarket to the guests that stay at your property, definitely collecting that information like we always talk about. When a guest is staying at your property, try to collect that user information. But for being able to really focus and like really, you being a marketing guy, you probably know it's like there comes a certain level of expertise and a certain level of, effort that takes to be able to drive, put dollars in and then expect a certain good return out. Otherwise, you're spending time, which costs money, and you're spending, money, which, maybe you could be using that to invest in other areas. So at which like income point, or at which point in a manager's career should they really be focusing on, like hiring someone, or should they be doing this themselves? Like, how do you balance that between marketer and operator?
Yeah, well, it's very difficult, especially when you're starting out, right? So, I just had a conversation with a smaller operator the other day, and if I were starting off today, and but I think let me step back. I will preface this by saying again, there's two different paths to go. You mentioned one where it's strictly a real estate portfolio play, where you just want heads on beds. Great, Airbnb model. Then you've got the model where you want longevity and profitability, and you want to build a business. That's the other side of it. So I'm speaking to the side that I know, right, and that I'm very familiar with. And so I want to make sure I make that perfectly clear. So the thing is, you want to be able to build the brand, scale the brand, make sure you have profitability, because that next hire will make a lot more sense when you're focused on the execution component. So if I was starting off today, I wouldn't need a PMS. I could use like an owner res, right, for a single person operator type of thing. I would look at my technology as tools, not as must-haves to run my business. So I have a small but robust PMS system to get me going. I would take that to my first, I guess there's a bunch of inflection points, I think, in the business. So let's say that carries you from 1 property to 10. When you get to 10, that's when you're probably going to look to your next hire. And it's probably going to be an operational hire, because hopefully you're thinking about your quality control. Your next inflection point is going to be when you hit 20 properties. The biggest inflection point is when you hit about 35 properties, because now you got to really make some big decisions. So you can run a very lean company just by making the right hires and making the right outsourcing decisions, but never outsource the core components of what you do. So if I'm a small operator today, small little PMS system, I'm focused on making sure that every person that comes into any of my properties has an incredible stay. I will make sure they don't leave until I'm in their social media, especially if they have a wonderful stay that they can promote and bring in that next stay. I'm going to be focused on getting my brand components right. And I'm going to make sure I've got my quality control, even at 1 or 2 properties, in place so that I don't slip that up. Because it really is a repetitive component as you scale, to make sure when that person comes in that you have enough of a foundation that you're not spending a ton of time training those folks. And I'm a firm believer from my hotel background that when you make that effort up front to capitalize on the things that have made your businesses successful, and you're able to transition that to the next person coming on board, there's a higher likelihood you're going to keep that person, right? So we're blessed here at Beach House Rentals. So on average, I think our folks have been with us 9 or 10 years, but a lot of them have literally built themselves into that next position. So, and the way we've done that is by sharing our successes and how we got to point A, and then allow them to expand to get it to point B. But if I'm starting off today, focus on that quality control, focus on the brand if you choose to scale, because that next hire will be a jack of all trades. It'll be a reservation agent / operational person / QC person. And once you get those pieces in place, you'll have success. It's replicable. So it's not impossible. It's very doable. You just have to make sure you can walk before you run.
What would you say is a realistic time frame for someone that is just getting started into this industry? They've been listening to every episode of the Success Stories podcast. They hear all the people that have been able to pull away from OTAs and have built their portfolios, and they're making good income. They're living the vacation rental life. What's a time frame do you think that someone that's just coming in now can successfully scale away from the OTAs, become less dependent, if not entirely, like you're at 100%, away from the OTAs. Is this something that you have to be in the industry for 17 years to be able to achieve, or is this something that you can achieve at a much sooner time frame?
That's a great question. Honestly, again, if I had to put it in perspective, starting today, it's something you could achieve. Always goes into what you put into it, right? But I think you could achieve it in a faster amount of time than someone that started 10 years ago. And the only reason I say that is that hopefully, and especially for a small operator in a leisure destination, don't be afraid to go talk to your quote unquote competitor down the street. There's knowledge, right? There's knowledge. These people are very bright in what they've done and achieved, and they can help you. An example, Stays Group, I think, is a perfect example of this, right? Because we're always full, our quote unquote competition are actually our partners now in the area, because when we're sold out, we refer business to them, right? So if you're a small quality operator, there are times when these bigger operators, a lot of times in leisure destination, where they're sold out. And they'd love to have a place, instead of making that traveler go somewhere else to another destination because they know they're coming here, why not make a friend and send them off to someone that's smaller? Because that smaller operator only has a finite number of nights they can sell, and hopefully they'll do reciprocate. And that's what we are. That's kind of what we do in the Stays group. So I think there's a lot of knowledge going forward that could be extrapolated from podcasts like yourself. There's a lot of wonderful people in our industry that are willing to share their experiences, that you can make better decisions to get you to that that level of independence pretty quickly, where you don't have to be completely dependent on the OTAs. So it's not an impossible feat at all. And again, I'll go back to the coffee analogy, right? Not every coffee shop is a Starbucks. Sorry, it's not. These smaller operators, they grind, they get the people in there, they give them great service, and they come back.
And what are some of the different strategies that you utilize? So, let's say, someone that was, staying at beach house rentals for the longest time, let's say it's a new generation, and, they're, it's not the book direct generation or the people that are looking for these book directs. Maybe these are people that, they just open up their phone, they pull up Airbnb, and they want to, stay somewhere. How are you actively able to keep on growing your guests, the customers that you're serving, without having to overspend or without having to feel that it's just a strain to be able to fill your occupancy?
Yeah. So given the fact that we've got such high retention rate, repeat guest rates, that's the building block, right? So again, whether you're a small operator, mid-size operator, the repeat guests are the key to this whole thing, because once they come in that second time and they're having a great stay, that's my reference point for my next guest. It's such a simple thing. It really is. It's again, getting into their circle, their network, if you will. If they had a great stay, that's where my next guest is coming from, right? So it's from a perspective of how we market, believe it or not, for beach house rentals, we put out emails every single week, not once a month, not once a quarter, every single week. Why? Because we now have built up a massive database, and we can really serve it in an endemic fashion for every holiday. So even if we're sold out for the holidays, we still have this marketing engine that allows us to sell the lower yield nights, right? So you're constantly in that marketing mode. But the best thing is when you have that guest and you deliver on the excellence, get into their network. That's the best, most cost-effective way to get your next guest, especially if you're small. Especially if you're in a drive-to leisure destination area, because they all talk amongst themselves. So whether you're a small operator in a leisure destination or even urban, right? But you do something different and unique. People love to talk about those things. They love to talk about your product. So give them a reason to do that.
So what you're talking about is growing your guests through organic referrals. But do you see this for the people that are scaling their management companies? So not only are they scaling, not only are they scaling the amount of properties that are underneath their company, but now they have to scale the amount of guests that are able to stay at those properties. Do you see, or do you know, what would be like the metrics, or how can you really scale your guests when you are also scaling your brand while also pulling away from the OTAs?
So I think what you're touching on is a funnel. And I urge again, whether you're a small operator, especially if you have a brand, this is the exercise that I go through all the time when I'm talking to folks, is I can tell by looking at your traffic what your direct business looks like. I can also see from your traffic what you're able to scale to. So there's the secret formula, right, is organic traffic is what leads to direct bookings, right? And so you want to keep those mechanisms in place, because that's what allows you to keep the balance as you scale. So you could literally look at your own SEO and look at your own funnel and predict relatively closely what you can actually support. Because again, back to that the anecdotal of the folks that scaled with Airbnb and the ones that didn't, that's the make or break, right? Because you really, before you start scaling those, if this group with all these Airbnb properties had a funnel and had a brand they would at least have been able to predict what happens if. They could ask that question and know that they could fill, what X percent of that inventory that they had, and they could scale comfortably. And that's the metric that we still use today. So I look on a weekly basis, like what our traffic looks like coming in, because that gives me a pretty good idea of can we hit our booking goal for the month, and the more organic traffic we're driving in, the higher likelihood we're going to achieve that direct booking. On the OTA side, if you're using OTAs, make sure that spigot's on, as high as it can go, and start monitoring the traffic. See what platform's delivering, right? Whether it's a regional listing site or an OTA, understand which one of these OTAs are actually driving the quality traffic that you need to survive. Just by tracking that number alone is an easy way to gauge how many properties you can bring on board, right? It's you're creating your own supply and demand loop within your own company. And it's a great place to be because you can make really good, solid decisions based on data that's not being fed to you. It's something that you need to go out and seek.
Coming from the hotel industry, when we talk about the vacation rental industry, there's a lot of mom and pop owners out there. They don't have a lot of marketing experience, if any. It's a lot of people with different backgrounds. Nobody's like typically born in the vacation rental industry. It's all people that, with various backgrounds. But, the hotel industry, these are people that have millions of dollars that have invested into a company. And it's just like, get a marketing person, get a website, do this thing. How is it really possible for someone that is a vacation rental manager to be able to juggle all of these balls, or really even compete against, these companies, or even these larger property management companies that are, dumping, millions of dollars into trying to take business away from potentially from vacation rental managers who are so dependent on the OTAs?
Sure. Well, every year I hear about how Book Direct is a failure. The OTAs are the only way you're going to make it. I've been hearing that for years. I'll be hearing it again this year. I'll be hearing it again next year. Again, it's how you position yourself. So even as a small operator, if you have a website and you have social media, that's half the battle right there. Have a brand. And again, if you're deciding that you want to stay in the business, invest in a website. It's not that expensive. There's a lot of small PMS systems that will build your website as part of the deal, and it'll be the best investment that you ever make. And you could now get into social media components, drive traffic to you, a great organic way of doing it. You can scale. OTAs are a part of the distribution, but your brand is also the investments you make in it. That should be your number one strategy if you want to stay in this business for the long term. But yeah, whether you're small or big, time is your biggest commodity. But there's so many different ways to market nowadays. Even if you don't have that marketing acumen, people can build it for you. And all you got to do is deliver on the services, right? When I look at the social media side, that's a wonderful attribute, provided you're plugged into the right networks. So if you have one property, you're not going to make big investments in SEO. You're going to be using the OTAs, but you're going to have a strategy to keep them there. So when I look at how does one market as they scale, given the time limitations, again, if you just focus on the quality control, get into their social network, especially if you're in Drive 2, you would be amazed how well you can do. And then if you decide to scale, you now have data looking at you that can tell you how far and how fast you can scale out the business. So I don't buy into the notion. As I said earlier, I think the OTAs are going to get more aggressive. They're obviously sitting on a ton of cash. But again, I've been told, I don't know how many years, that they're just going to outbid me now. It's not happening. It's not happening.
Where do you see the short-term rental industry going, Vince? Do you see that it's just going to be these maybe larger OTAs that are just getting the majority of the public to just book directly with them, the same way that, like, I only shop on Amazon now. Like, sometimes I prefer to just go on Amazon just because of the convenience of it, rather than, go out to a store or do these things. There are, cases, where, I might go to a store because it's a little bit more boutique, or, for that reason. But for convenience sake, it's there. Do you see these OTAs and people booking more with them, or is separating your vacation rental business aside from the OTAs more of like a boutique, almost like a boutique or a niche thing? Or do you see this as being like a bigger brand, like, let's say, Hyatt, Marriott, one of these larger, brands?
Sure. So, wow, that's kind of a broad question. So I think the OTAs are trying to figure that out, right? You've had Expedia that acquired Vrbo. Vrbo wasn't performing as well as they'd like before the pandemic, right? It's doing well now, but everybody is, right? Airbnb, we don't know what that's going to look like. You got hotel groups like Marriott coming in. I suspect there'll be other hotel groups coming in. I think the future of the independent branded operator is extremely bright. There's a lot of different mechanisms in there that will drive that, right? Regulatory is a big deal. We have to get that problem solved. But when I look at the market itself and how the folks in the Stays Group, how they've performed during this pandemic, yeah, it's incredible. They've done incredibly well. They've introduced to another set of cohorts from the hotel side that love what they do. I think the hotels understand the value now of the vacation rental segment of what we do. And more importantly, I think they recognize the resiliency of these operators. And I think that provides a great future for the industry itself. The OTAs will find their way. They're going to be always be a valuable part of our ecosystem. I just think there's going to be more of a balance between the cohorts that just are looking for a cheap place to stay, if you will, and then the cohorts that are actually looking for value, right? So again, that's the Amazon part, right? Where you're just trying to get that filled, which is wonderful. It's great. It's convenient. But I can tell you from the cohorts that we work with is that, they want to make sure that their families are well taken care of. They don't want to be fussing with a lockbox at 10 at night when they have their twin daughters with their mom only because dad's on the way, locked out. These are the things that kind of matter. And again, that's what the hotel business operates, right? The hospitality side. And coming back to what I said at the very beginning is that if I strip out all the technology and all the other noise, it's really about the relationships you have with your guests, the owners, and your team. That's the starting point of what you have. You started today. Oddly enough, as you scale, those are the most important pieces that help you hold your business together during a pandemic, right? My technology didn't help me hold things together. It was working with the people internally that helped the business go on finding ways to weather the storm. And that's what we do as entrepreneurs. And that's why I always urge people, talk to your quote unquote competitors out there. Make friends with these people because that's not your competition. The OTAs are coming from the outside to come into your area. But you've got these entities that are right near you that will be helpful to you. We need each other and I think that's one of the things that the industry is learning right now is the strength of what happens when you can work together.
And Vince, if you could go back from scratch, what would you do differently?
I don't look back. I always look forward. In anything I've ever done in my life, in every venture I've ever been on, you learn, you make mistakes, and hopefully you learn way more from those mistakes than you do from the successes, and you stay humble. But I don't look back. I always look forward. It just fogs my mind. There's so many things out in front of you that provide opportunity that's where, in my opinion, that's where my energy is focused.
And some of those biggest mistakes that you mentioned, what were some of those biggest, maybe one or two of those biggest mistakes that you made and the lessons learned from them?
I couldn't even tell you because I look forward. I just know whatever it was I've learned. I don't have that compartment in my head for negative thoughts. I used to play baseball quite a bit, and if you have success 3 out of 10 times, you're in the Hall of Fame. That's because you have a very short memory with the other 7 things that went really bad. And I've always maintained that in everything I do. It's like, you learn, you move on.
Well, if you could give one last parting advice to someone that is just starting off, they're listening to this episode and maybe they're feeling a little overwhelmed with the amount of information and what we're talking about here. What type of advice would you give to that new manager?
Sure. In this case, they probably experienced this, right? It's a lot harder than you thought it was going to be, and it'll probably get a lot harder given where we're going. I can also tell you that, again, if you have the right focus, I think you'll find it to be one of the most rewarding businesses you can be in. What's unique about the business is that you have incredibly smart people that are willing to help you within the industry. That's how I learned about the industry, and I still do today. I'm blessed, and I get to talk to some incredible PMs that are great at executing their business. I get to talk to vendors in the space that have done some incredible things. There's all this knowledge that's within our industry and people that are willing to help you, which is hard to find in any other industry when you think about it, right? Especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, because that connotates in and of itself that you're going to be grinding on your own. So you could choose to grind on your own and figure out a way to come out the other end, or you could tap into resources around you to become stronger. So be it podcasts, be it user groups, be it reaching out to folks that you've never talked to before. I think there's a lot of things that could be very helpful to you as you grow. I would not get discouraged. I would certainly look at creating a brand and sticking with it. I can't emphasize that enough for those people that do want to continue long-term in the business. It's the only way you're going to make it going forward. So learn from some smart people. They're willing to help you get to where you're going. And it's a great business. Enjoy yourself. Always be a happy warrior when you're in this business.
Awesome. Thank you for the parting advice, Vince. And what's the best way, if anybody wants to be able to connect with you, reach out, if they have any further questions or want to find out more about what you're doing, how can they connect with you?
Sure. Best way to reach me is at vince@fetchmyguests.com or vince@beachhouserentals.com. Either one of those will do.
Awesome. And of course, we're going to include the direct booking links, all the links for that we talked about in the show notes. Thank you so much, Host Nation. And until next time, keep on hosting. Hope you hosts benefited from the show. If you found value, please go on over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let us know what you enjoy about the show. If you'd like to talk to hosts that have been featured in these episodes as well as the community, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation.